Hey, Kevin Lawrence here. Very excited today to be here with Francine Carlin from the Business Harmonizer Group, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. But she works with a couple of the family businesses we work with. She's highly recommended and very skilled at what she does. Basically, as a family business advisor, been doing it for more than 24 years, and as a seasoned leader herself. And she knows what it takes to help family businesses or family-owned businesses deal through the challenges of succession and conflict resolution and developing their families and the people that are the future leaders of the business. Um, and for her, she has an ability to connect through the emotional dynamics with practical business solutions. Essentially, she understands the principles, but she's just not approaching it through like a mathematical or just a legal point of view. She's taken into account the human nature of it. When I've talked to Francine, it's always about the human side of it. She's got lots of certifications in business advising, and has roles in Canadian Association of Family Enterprise, as well as a consultant for BDO Success Care, as a master's from the State University of New York at Buffalo, and contributed to academic institutions such as Royal Roads University out here, and an associate faculty member of the Board of Governors. So she has incredible experience and background. The root of it is family businesses going through succession and wanting to set the next generation or generations up to win. And that's what she does. That's how she spent much of her career doing this. So Francine, thank you for spending the time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity. Happy to share my experience, what I know, and what else in between, right?
Yeah. Well, when you spend a life like yours doing the same type of work, helping people with the same types of things, and we've talked like, we do strategic planning and development for a CEO and an exec team, and you have a very similar body of work that you do for the owner and their family. It's very similar, although different approach, different audience, but a very similar type of thinking. So it's very, yeah, it's fascinating. So tell me a bit like about kind of your specific credentials that you think help you in what you're doing, and then how you got into doing this.
Okay, well, thanks for that question. I came to Canada, basically Vancouver, in 1998. I left a career in Washington, D.C., where I was an executive in marketing, public affairs for big international associations, tech companies, and the government. And I was at a point in my life that it was second marriage, and he lives out here, so I came out here. And reinvented myself at 50. So I came and connected with people from the business community here in Vancouver, and particularly with some of the portfolio companies, the advisors, investment advisors. And they told me about the Canadian Association of Family Enterprise at the time. It was active in the late 90s. And I got involved with them and went through a professional development program through the Business Family Foundation. I was a founding instructor of what's now the UBC Roadmap course, part of the Family Enterprise program. And so I started doing pro bono work, offering my skill set to families across Vancouver, and it just became connected and continued. And 24 years later, still, I've got a book of business that with many of the people I've been working with for 15 years on and off, working
Isn't that
with
awesome?
their families, et cetera. So it's a journey, life's a journey.
Yeah.
And when one door closes, another one opens. And that's how I viewed my career journey and my personal journey as well. So
Awesome. It is funny how the journey continues, because you're walking alongside these families and helping them with their transition or their journeys, and you learn and grow yourself at the same time. I find
absolutely.
that fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. No, I've
So
learned a lot from the families I work with.
I bet. And it's wonderful because we work with people for a long time, and
Right.
lots of our clients are family businesses. And I just, we have one of our clients in India. I think it's close to 15 years. Another one that we both have done work with, which is 15 years. Other ones that are 20 years.
Yeah.
And you become part of the fabric of what they're doing, and a kind of an ongoing trusted advisor, which is rewarding for us. And you also know them well, so it's easier to assist them because you have all the context of all the fascinating
Right.
stuff inside a family.
Right. And it's confidentiality. That's very important. that role that we
Oh
both
yeah.
have. I would say that
Yes.
what's said in the room stays in the room, and that's always how I open my meetings, with
Yeah.
a framework for confidentiality and also engagement. That what's said in the room stays in the room. We begin with I as opposed to you statements. It's respectful. Create a safe space when we begin our meetings. Always important.
Yeah, can you say more about that? And it's also similar in our work, but if you don't have the right psychological environment, you can't really do the work that needs to get done. Can you share more about that?
Oh, well, yes, I can. Thank you. When any individual or individual in a business family decides they want to work on developing a family business community, a business family community, there has to be an understanding that everybody needs to be around the table, and
Mm,
the importance of engaging each person in understanding what it is that they want and what they need, and then see if there's a place for common ground. And so that's where we begin. If there's people who are willing to sit down and say, yeah, we disagree, we agree to disagree, but we want to find a place where there's a place where we can go and say, beyond the place of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field. Let me meet you there. That's that famous
yep.
Umi quote that says, we really all have the best interests in mind, which is best interests of the family and best interests of the business. So I look at it as maintaining and ensuring family harmony and supporting business continuity. And so you begin with that, with a willingness to say yes. That's the
Hmm.
important thing. And that it's oftentimes when I get contacted by members of a business owning family, it's either the next generation concerned about the founder not letting go, or it's the founder concerned that the next generation is not going to be involved. So it's a little bit of a dance, and we don't want to dance in the dark. We want to be able to have our eyes open and really know
Mm,
how to go forward together. And that's how I approach it.
I
That
like
people
that.
all want to try to work together in harmony and in support of continuity. So
I like that. I like that don't want to dance in the dark, which means you really kind of got to get all the stuff out in the open versus stuff being hidden away in the shadows.
right,
That's a
exactly.
great metaphor. I like that a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, that's it. So yeah, and when and as part of it, we look at the heart and the mind. So you want to identify some of the barriers so you can go forward and do meaningful strategic planning. You want to identify what's working, what's not, so that you can have a sense of the relationship between family as family, the relationship as family and employee, and the relationship of family as an owner. So people have different roles in the universe of the
Hmm.
business owning family system. And we approach it as a systems thinking approach, so that we look at this as a system that's all connected, and you have different roles and responsibilities within that system. And in order for it to work effectively, people need to be at least on the same page for the direction they're going. So that's sort of
That's a big thing. I've heard a lot of people talk about how important it is to understand the different roles that people have.
yeah,
And
yeah,
someone might be part of the family, but not in the management or running of the business.
right.
And
And
they're still connected,
yes.
but sometimes people get their roles mixed up. And even I've seen it in one family business that I work with in a different country where one of the second generation, well, technically third generation was in the business
Mhm.
as an employee, probably, 3 or 4 layers away from the founder, or sorry, the second generation leader. And they started to act like that they had family privileges as an employee.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and it's easy to say that when that they shouldn't do that. And I remember in this particular case, the person was very capable, but when things didn't go well with their boss, they kind of pulled the family card.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
then
yeah.
worse, their parent, and I kind of keep it very generic, their parent then swooped in and supported them pulling the family card with their boss 4 or 5 layers down in the organization.
Yeah, that's very disruptive, very disruptive. And that's why one of the first things that happens when I engage with families in business who have family members who are looking to work in the business, we create a business family employment policy so that people know where they stand. It's part of the beginning of engaging the next generation, and also getting the founders or the senior members to know this is how it works. You don't skip, you don't walk before you can run, or don't run before you can walk.
Yes.
Is that's the whole way. And it's really the important role of a facilitator, a guide, or coach, to point that out in a gentle way if you're working with a family that wants to ensure the well-being of their business, and also not to explode the family. Yeah, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing.
Yeah, and I know in this case, and I'm sure you've dealt with it lots, the protective parent truly wanted to support their child. They had beautiful intentions, and they didn't realize they were creating ramifications where their child was labeled now as trouble.
Yeah.
And it was dramatically limiting their career, and people were afraid to work with them. They didn't want to work with them, and they were afraid to work with them.
Well, that's nepotism,
Yeah.
and that's the downfall of many successful businesses. No boundaries. That's one of the things we establish also with business families, is that there's a place to talk about business, and there's a place to talk about family. And it's not necessarily the kitchen table or at a social event. You have to create boundaries and places where these things take place. And that's the role of, I think, of an advisor. Say, you need to create space for these conversations to take place so it doesn't blow up.
Like the appropriate space so it doesn't leak into places that it shouldn't.
Exactly.
So in your experience, like how do you set up the time to talk about business within a business family? Like, is that structured meetings, almost like board meetings, or is there a different, what are the things you found work?
Well, through the best practices of the Business Family Foundation or the Family Enterprise, this field has been around for now 40 years.
Yes.
Oh, I'd say now 35 years. And the whole idea is that you create a business family council, and there's members of both there's working active members, and there's non-active. There's governing members, and there's non-governing. Within that council, there's also subsets. There's a next generation committee. That could be a shareholders board, which are the owners. But the most important thing is you begin to identify what the importance of communication. And communication needs to be managed. It's not just, let's say, go for coffee. Yes, nothing wrong with that. But I think we have a meeting, and we have protocols, and we establish a framework around that. And usually the meetings begin with interviews with the key players, and then the outcomes from the interviews are shared. And, you work with the group, in terms of developing the environment so it's safe, and you begin to identify what's working, what's not, what's needed. What are the needs, what are the concerns, and what are the appreciations? And you take that there, and then it's a collaborative process. It's not one person, reprimanding another. It's a dialogue. It's not a discussion. It was just discussion is like percussion. You don't want to have somebody pounding at you. A dialogue is a flow, and you have to be able to move it, like I call harmony. Harmonizer is like an orchestra. You want to be able to have all voices be heard, but you don't want to have dissonance.
Yeah, could you explain that? Because that's the name, the Business Harmonizer Group, and in all of our conversations, the thing that comes out the most, and I remember, is about communication and relationship is the stuff that you continually, I hear from you. And it's interesting. Years ago, I was talking to a lawyer who does a lot of legal work for family businesses. And he says, Kevin, if you can ever find a way to get these families to sign off on agreements, I will have infinite work for you, because he goes, we draw up excellent, fair agreements, but we can't get them signed. 90-something% never, ever, ever get signed. And what's interesting is when we started talking, and when you were referred by one of our clients, you said that there's this whole legal and technical part of it, but the work or the heart or the core that makes a difference is the relational, communication, emotional part of it.
Yeah,
that was a big distinction, because as this lawyer said, they're doing excellent work on good, fair agreements.
Yeah.
But he wasn't addressing the other side, so of course they wouldn't get signed. That's
Well,
my today.
you have to get buy-in,
Yeah.
and it's really goes back to starting at the beginning. Who are we as a family, and what do
Hmm.
we stand for? What are our values as people? What does that look like? And then you get to the place where you can create the technical, so what's the percentage for this, the percentage of that? And,
Mm.
how does it work so that if you have next generation, how do we protect our assets? Well, is there a marital agreement or prenuptial agreement? And we talk about why that's important. We don't say you have to have that kind of
Yeah.
agreement.
Yeah.
The Thor's hammer cannot come in. It's got to be more of a feather, and it has to be
Mm.
that people
Mm.
see their own self in these agreements and this process, so people feel seen and heard, and being able to say, well, this is what I think. And married-ins
Mm.
are also, the outlanders, I'm the parent, but why don't I get something to say? And so create a space for that. There was one family that the issue of gossip was horrific. The competitive between one side of the family on the other. We had to create a code of conduct around gossip. Everybody
Mm.
signed off on it because they saw how it was hurting them. And
Right.
those are, it's not therapy. It's basically facilitation with a heart, you know, um, and you have to have your own ability to see within yourself, first of all, as a coach, as a guide, to see
Mm-hmm.
where your strengths are, where your liabilities are, and as the journey of life is such that I think, yeah, I have to look at myself as well. I can't just be this one-way mirror. It's got to be a two-way mirror. And so
Yep.
um that's
I agree with that. I find even in our work, which is similar, Francine, is like the person facilitating the meeting needs to be just as open, just as vulnerable, just as willing to hear other people's perspectives, and in a way that's facilitating and leading the meeting, not getting in the way of it. But it's like you
yeah,
got to be able to, and the thing of looking in the mirror and looking at ourselves is so important, because it's the this is not an intellectual process, even in a boardroom, the side of it that we do with the CEO and their teams.
mhm,
And if you're just approaching it purely technically, it's like the room gets tight and the right conversation won't happen. And then when the wrong conversation happens, if you can't help to make it healthy, then it's like it all just disappears. The trust disappears. Everyone clams up and doesn't want to say anything. And I imagine it's quite similar from what you're saying.
oh yeah, no, there's my first meeting with this one client, so a couple years ago. I went to the office and I walked into the room and I said, whoa, there is a lot of tension in this room, isn't there? And they went, how did you know that? I said, guys, look at your faces.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, okay. And let the thing out, let the thing out. You got to be able to read the room and also know it's not your story, it's their story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're there to enable and facilitate great discussion.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
shocking the more you speak about the similarity. So
Yeah.
for going back into the family though, it sounds like you put it doesn't sound like it's heavy governance type structure, but you're putting structures in place to support communication happening the right way in the right places, it sounds like. That's
Yeah.
a piece. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so this one family working with, we started out with values. So because I think it's important
Mhm.
that we start a meeting, what value we're going to champion during this meeting. Is it family? Is it caring? What is it? And they didn't want to start with governance. They were really on we need to do this succession planning, this strategic plan. And so when I said, fine, we'll start at the caboose. So
Yeah,
we won't
sure.
start at the engine. And
That's what they wanted. Yep.
that's what they wanted. So so we started there with their SWOT and everything like that. And it became clear that everything towards the end, oh, we really need to have a place to share this with our children. And so how can we do that? So that's what we're doing. You're going to have a meeting about governance, which is really about how we're going to share this in a meaningful way with
Yeah.
our kids. And so you can't, sometimes the journey is a little more winding.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's not, it's more iterative and not prescriptive. Look at
Yeah.
it that way.
And as you're saying, you got to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
Get them moving in a direction that they want them. And then other things will come up naturally in time. And if you're too prescriptive and if it's too tight,
Yeah.
I like what you said
Also-
earlier, and I've also heard, but it's about people need to see themselves, they need to be heard and see themselves in the agreement. And that sounds like, masterful communication. Can you just maybe expand on that a little bit more, Francine, about I
Well,
know that I've never I like the way you've said it. Maybe you can just expand on it a little bit.
well, to see yourself in the agreement means that you've had a role in helping shape it. So when we get to in a lot of agreements, we have values have to be agreed upon. So, the fact that it took 3 hours to determine if the family was entrepreneurial or had an entrepreneurial spirit, everybody
Right.
was heard. It wasn't me pushing it, guys, it's 2 hours now, and you're still
Right.
decide. But once we had that, they said, oh, okay, yes, but we're entrepreneurial spirit. And so because of that, that's in their way of growth. And they see themselves in their agreements going forward. They see that they've helped shape the direction. So again, the dialogue is really important. The decision to like philanthropy. If we're no, this is who we're going to give to, this is this group on this side. Well, let's talk about what you like and what is your favorite, what's your story around giving? And you begin to use the story approach, say, well, what has happened to you in your work that you believe needs to be communicated here? And so we just ask the question. It's the probing,
Mm-hmm.
and the prompting of the word that have people become more engaged. There
Yeah.
are times also, I can tell you, I've been called a lot to come in to work with family businesses, and we have the big meeting, and then they don't go forward because
Mm-hmm.
you probably, that it sounded great, everybody loved it, but then I get a call from one of the younger members, my dad's scared, doesn't want to do this,
Yeah.
or my older brother thinks it's a waste of time. So sometimes you're just going to have a no.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not ready for it or
Yeah.
they don't need it. Like I've seen some family businesses where this will come up and we talk to the founder about it. And the founder will be well into their 80s and doesn't want to address it. They're also similar. They don't want to address their estate planning outside of just the succession and family piece of it. Sometimes people don't like to touch this. They it makes them very uncomfortable for whatever reason, and they don't want to do it.
Well, we deal with mortality,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all going to live forever, and it's not going to happen to me, you know. And that's the issue for some founders and for some next generation. I don't need to look at this. I'm just doing my work day by day.
Yep.
And so those are the conversations that I've had with one family, gentleman in his late 80s. I said, it's time that you signed the agreement that your offspring is going to be in charge.
Mm.
And it's only because one of his colleagues passed away, and suddenly I said, do you want to go? And it's not there. And you have, wherever you go, you have the knowledge in your soul that you didn't
Yep.
do the right thing at the right time. And I mean, I've worked with them for 10 years. I could say
Yeah.
that.
It sounds like you have a good relationship with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And finally that was signed.
Yeah.
And he's still around and he's breathing easily, etc. But that's where yourself as a trusted advisor, coach, leadership person that sometimes you have to say, at the risk of losing your business, I need to say to you that this isn't going to work,
Yep.
And it just, it becomes like that honesty.
Yeah. And when you've built the trusted relationship, you
Yeah.
can do that. And I think you need to.
Yeah.
If you don't, I feel like then you're not doing your job. And at least in the type of work that we do, but that's hard.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's not therapy, it's communication.
Yeah.
It's looking the person in the eye and say, look, do you hear what I'm saying? Can you understand it? Can you please repeat it back? Can you please express it in a way that makes you feel heard? And then
Yep.
that appears in the agreement. There's a sense that it's not a legal technical document that has no heart, that it's
Yeah.
got some soul.
That's somebody else's. It's their document versus mine.
Right. And I like to call it an evergreen portfolio. You have the values, you have the estate plan, you have the shareholder agreement, and you have the charter. And the charter is everything from defining the roles of owners, the financial reporting schedule, so you have something that, is beyond, it's not like the shareholders agreement, but it's a charter that says this is how we're going to work together.
Right.
And
More
so
operational. Yeah.
now after, I'd say 12 years, we're finally doing a charter. So that's, I said, that'll be it. I'm done. Once we've got the charter, have a nice day.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. I can just get them to see this. But the biggest thing was communication.
Yep.
It's,
I see that.
3 people, 4 people, it's communication.
Yep.
So,
And then if they communicate well in a healthy way, then it's easier to agree on things and have principles to operate. So what would you expect? I was talking to one of my clients actually yesterday, and they've they built a very successful business, and they're wanting to start to incorporate the kids into it. They're at that point where they're kind of getting ready to do that, and they expect to be running their business for a long time, but they want their kids to be involved in just understanding the business and also the philanthropy, because they're notable, they're very philanthropic. What would you say? And I know every situation is different and you got to meet them where they are, but if there was like 2 or 3 things that you would suggest to people that want to get started. I mean, obviously finding someone like yourself who has done it many times and is a guide and a facilitator to bring it to life. What would you suggest?
They want to bring their offspring into the business. I would suggest first, if the offspring are interested in being in the business, what is your experience, Jane, John, George, with the business, the business? What is your experience? What are your memories? And you get a sense of if they have a connection. And then, tell me about your experience. Did you ever work in the business as an intern in the summertime? What has been your experience? Or did you notice the family fighting about things around the kitchen table? Tell me about your history around the family business. Were you even involved? Did you ever go down to the shop, or did you ever, tour the properties? Did you ever, whatever? And you'll find out, then you'll say, okay, we're at a point now, as your parents, your father, your mother, whatever it is, the board is interested in looking at succession. And we want to understand your interest in being of a role as an owner, as an active employee, or just to distance yourself and just say, I'm happy to have the dividends. You ask those questions.
Yeah.
Then
I
you
like
say,
that.
okay, well, we're thinking of having a meeting to begin to discuss this. Before we have this meeting, we'd like to have somebody talk with you confidentially and ask those questions. And, you put together the questions and you say, this is confidential. I'm just creating your concerns, your needs, and what do you appreciate about this opportunity, or, and then you begin. And you use the skills you have as a coach or facilitator to begin to unwind and create something that's possible for this family to come together around. It's really it's like knitting. I don't knit. It's unfortunate. I have no sense of, numbers or anything like that. But for me, it's like organizing a room. All right. Where do you want to put the chairs? How do you want people to be connected? How do you begin to sense that there's space in the room for being real, and that's where you begin. You ask the question. Sometimes it's like, what was your most memorable experience as a child growing up in relationship to the business? And it goes around, it's a story. And then they say, well, and I ask people to bring photos or memorabilia. There's one family I worked with in the Kootenays, resource business. And they were going through a bit of a crisis because of the resource economy, et cetera. And the founder, well, not the founder, he was the son of the founder. And this is a mill. So we're talking grandson, great-grandson situation. And so we're going to have a meeting. And I interviewed them beforehand. I said, could you please bring something of some meaning for yourself to this meeting we're going to have in your home on this date? And this gentleman, who was 80 something, walks into the room, and he throws this hat on the table. This was my father's hat, and it was like one of these, lumberjack hats, right? And he said, my dad got me up at 4 o'clock every morning and we went down to the mill and he wore this hat and I wore this hat. So that's my story. You got to work hard in order to earn your way in the world. Boom. And then we went around the table. So people bring themselves, and it's about the family story. And that's what's important. The family story is really what keeps people together. I think it can be a sad story, which takes people apart, or the sad story can bring people together. Power struggles in families. When you feel a groom getting angry, you need to stop and say, okay, we're having a struggle here and we need to unearth it. And so let's go around and we put things on a piece of paper, and we just do the tools that you use as a facilitator, coach, whatever, mediator, to get to common ground. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. I continually, every time, everything that you're sitting, I'm almost going back into, older civilizations where the community would be sitting around the fire having a conversation. Like everything, I keep getting this image. And that's essentially what you're doing, is getting people in a circle, in the right environment, generally in the picture I have where there's an elder facilitating a conversation and getting them to talk about the important stuff that relates to that group of humans.
Right, exactly. The tribe. And sometimes you say, okay, the youngest one, come up and tell us what your dream is and what you see, and you create a safe place for that. You don't just start the thing out with, okay, everybody stand up and tell your story. No, it's one family, we had them put together a book of memories. And we had a meeting that everybody shared the outcomes of the book and read the story. And what really drove people to make decisions to start a business. I didn't want to be I didn't want to be a cog in a wheel. I wanted to be my own wheel, and they talked about things like that. And it created a sense of community and emotional assets.
Yeah.
If you're not working in the business, the emotional asset of being connected is important. Like I know the one family we both work with, they would once a year rent a van and go around to all the properties with the kids and say, this is what we're building for our generational wealth. And you have a role to play in that because you have a reputation. We don't want you being someone we can't respect in the community, so that one of the things in the shareholders agreement, if you've been convicted of a criminal offense, you can't be an owner, that kind of thing. And you need to have you need to carry yourself in the community because our name represents this community. So those kinds of things, people go, oh yeah, that's important. And so they help shape the code of conduct, and they own the code of conduct.
Yeah. And they are the code of conduct. And it's not just something that gets imposed to them and they get smacked with when something goes wrong.
Right.
And that's almost, it's bringing them along the journey and almost teaching them these things, almost like a family teaches proper values and how you deal with your grandparents and your neighbors and your aunts and uncles. You're creating that same kind of training and development for them around the company.
And these days, the importance of having values that are meaningful, that are grounded in respect and truth, really important in these days of misinformation and distrust. So
it is. I really like that piece about also, like, if you're convicted of something, then you can't be an owner, because that's holding up the integrity of the family and the family name and the family brand. And also just like, it's one thing, people make bad choices and that's their choice, but it's not going to affect the whole family. And in a family business, one person's choices can affect the whole family.
Right. When they work it in the agreement that they can be bought out and they're not going to be punished, but they're not going to represent the family and the community. And those are harsh, difficult situations,
It is.
You have to sometimes draw a line in the sand, about things, so it's not.
Well, if there is, people don't know if people don't know what's expected of them, it's hard for them to live up to it sometimes. Yeah, I hear. So if I'm just summarize is that you are putting principles and guidelines and agreements in place, but that sits on top of the foundation of great communication and great relationships with people is really, it's not like without in your approach and why you're successful at what you do is yeah, those things without an environment of trust and open and great communication, those things aren't, whether they're not going to get done or they're not going to be impactful as they're intended.
Right.
That's
No,
awesome.
that's exactly right, Kevin. I mean, that's the joy of being human.
Yeah.
And
you're
and
recognizing it and trying to find a way to help the humans work better together or as a family. Yeah.
At the same time, you grow economically.
Yes.
And you have generational wealth. You keep the society moving forward, and you're good examples of what needs to be when you're having yourself in the world.
Yes. And I think that's the thing that I've seen with the families that are really, at the end of the day, they know the family, the wealth will continue. They just want to make sure that the next generation is good custodians and good representatives, good role models of people that have resources like that and doing good and being a good person in a community.
Yeah.
And they don't get lost in it, because we've all seen examples of that.
I've seen it. Yeah.
We've seen, as you and I talked in our but once it starts, if people are already way off in that direction where it's gone, it's very hard to pull people back.
Yeah.
Because they have decades of beliefs and habits that are ingrained into them. It's like I have this philosophy in at this stage of my life is that no one's really trying to be a jerk or difficult. Nobody is trying to. Now they've got things that maybe are making it hard for them to communicate cleanly, or maybe they've whatever issues they've been affected by in their life. People have behavior that's makes them hard to deal with sometimes.
Right.
But in many ways, they're still just trying to do the best they can. It's just it's different or not consistent with what what other people around them might want.
Well, you unwind the story, you unthread the story, and you rethread it, and that's what happens in the first meeting. You begin to create that everybody hears the story, that your perspective. You may view it through one lens, and another person views it as another lens. One person views it as a lens of an older sister, one is the younger sister, one is the old, and so you have to say everybody, oh, I didn't realize you thought that. And then you begin to expose the fact that you're living in your own head, in your own context, and not living in their shoes. And so, yeah. And plus I talked about birth order. When you come out, the experience of a founder is different when they're beginning the business and you have a child, except when a child is born, when the business is growing. Different experiences, and it impacts it. It's a visceral experience, and that has to be called out. About why there's this tension and why we can't make a decision, and those kinds of things, that you look at where people are in their life cycle and their business.
And depending on the life cycle of the business, and was the business struggling? Did the business on the verge of bankruptcy, or did they just have their windfall years when all of those things happened?
Yeah. Or were they traveling all the time? Weren't available to be at home, blah, blah, blah. I mean, all this stuff that shapes who you are and your reaction to a particular situation. No, I'm not going to.
That's why you go back to their stories about the business. What do you remember? What's your biggest memories? That's very interesting. Because that's gonna impact their relationship with the business and their relationship with the other family members based on those experiences. That's fine. We could talk about this forever. Francine,
we could. Okay. So
it's great. And I mean, obviously you're a master of this, and hearing the way you articulate it so simply and elegantly, and can feel the wisdom coming through.
Oh, well, you're awesome. Sweet. Thank you very much.
Well, it's awesome. I love talking to people that are masterful at what they do, because you learn and you can see it. You're not just reciting textbook. This is real stuff coming out of your pores. So the thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, you can go. I can recommend some texts, some resources, but
that's what I was going to ask. That would be very helpful. Like, where do people, if they want to learn? Because most families sooner or later want to learn about this stuff. And where would you point people?
Well, one of the things that I know a couple of the families have done and are going to be doing, is going to conferences or gatherings where there are other family-owned businesses. So the Family Business Magazine out of the States, out of Philadelphia, has 2 conferences a year. There's Transitions Spring, Transitions Fall.
I have that. I get that magazine. It's really good. Yeah. I think you had mentioned it to me before. It's really good. Yeah.
And I've gone to several of their transition conferences with clients. Advisors can't go by themselves. You have to be sponsored to go with a client. So I've done that a couple of times. And it's transformational, particularly for the next generation. They got to see other families, other stories.
Mm,
It's well done. And Canada has their, the Canadian Association of Family Enterprise doesn't really exist as it does. I mean, it did before, since UBC took it over. It's really more of a technical thing. Vancouver Island has a family business group that's Family Business Vancouver Island, which is more grassroots. But there's a Family Enterprise Canada, which is really it's a good educational resource. It's really about advisors.
okay.
And so the importance of having families who know each other, who are in business, to connect without sharing personal information is really important.
Right.
I found that those kinds of gatherings are important. And reading too. The family business consulting group out of the States is ancient. They all these senior leaders, but they have free resources on their website, articles, and which I use them all the time because they have been around for 40 years, and
Right.
they have a cadre of people. They're the States, but the point is they have a great library of resources. And I'm sad that what Vancouver used to have a really great gathering of people, but things change, and
Yeah.
they still do have wonderful people. There are people around, and the program at UBC is a good one. But it's mostly for the advisors, and so I think it's important that things like this that you do here, Kevin, are important. And of course, because the family business enterprise education is international now. And so if
Yes.
people want to know about it, they can go online, they can do their research, they can, just find out what's going on. I've been doing this for 20, because I was in marketing. The first thing I did when I came here, I established a website under another company, called Performance Partnership, and I changed my name to Business Harmonizer. I'm still top 10 in Google. It's just, even though it says my
Really?
business is closed because we moved from Vancouver to Salt Spring.
Right. Right.
I thought I can't deal with Google, and I'm not really actively marketing now, but it's I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to have a conversation and direct them to some people. I have in the past, and to you, I could direct them to you as well.
Yeah.
It's just more of a, life goes on, and we do what we do, and then we say, okay, I'm winding down.
Yeah. It's time for your next part of your own life.
I'm
That's
in my
right.
third
Yeah.
chapter. I'm in my third chapter.
Yes. That's exciting. It's very
And
exciting.
that's what we're doing. So
Awesome.
available to people who want to do work, if they want to do work and not start from the beginning. If they're in the middle, yeah, happy to help.
Awesome. Well, you're a great resource, Francine. I thank you for spending the time with us and sharing your wisdom. And two of our clients are work with you and are thrilled on the work that you've done with their families. Right? They always speak very, very highly.
Thank you.
And that's And after
Yeah.
spending more time with you, it's not surprising. It's just it's a valuable thing. It's a sensitive, valuable, important thing.
Yeah.
And for the people that are willing to do it, you can make a notable difference by doing the work and getting the family aligned. And if you don't do it, it might still work out too. It's just harder.
It's
Or
harder.
you're leaving it up to the odds one. Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Francine, very much for spending time with us today. Again, I've loved this conversation.
So
And
have I,
we'll put
Kevin.
Francine's information, her website and stuff in the link. And if you need assistance, you can reach out. She's a great resource.
Well, you take care, and best of success to you. Thanks again, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Bye.
Bye.